Hey guys, at this point I have played roughly 60 hours of Lies of P. I have beaten the game 3 times. My first playthrough took me 27 hours, and I tried to do absolutely everything possible. And now I've completed 2 more playthroughs, one of New Game Plus and then one of a fresh new build, and I'm sitting at around 60 hours. So I'm just going to come out the gate swinging. I think this might be one of my most controversial takes, but I don't even care. I think that this is not only the best 3D Souls-like game, okay, so not counting like Hollow Knight or Blasphemous or anything, 3D. I think this is not only the best 3D Souls-like game, but I think this is better than a lot of FromSoft's official Souls-like titles. And I would put it up there with Bloodborne and Sekiro as my favorite of this entire genre. I absolutely love and adore this game. No game that is a fresh new IP from a dev I have never heard of has hit me the way that this game has hit me. I mean, I honestly could not tell you the last time I played a game from a dev I had never heard of that was this much of a fucking banger. It's incredible. But let me go ahead and tell you why. Let's get into the pros and then the cons, and then I'll tell you my final verdict. So, first pro, right out the gate, I think the graphics are quite good. Especially with everything on Ultra, I think they're quite good, especially at some points the reflections and the lighting, they look incredible. And the performance is fantastic. I essentially never dropped below 144 FPS, and yeah, write that down from Soft. I mean, Armored Core had, over 60, but most of the time FromSoft games are capped at 60, and it feels fucking atrocious when you're used to 144 hertz refresh rate, and you have this expensive ass PC to push these games to the limit. And yeah, this game does not have that issue, luckily, at all. Basically, on all Ultra, 144 FPS, and it looks quite good. Maybe this footage won't really do it justice, but actually when you're in the game, it looks really good. The animations are also done very well. All of the move sets for all of the weapons that I've used are animated clean. And the animations of the enemy attacks, which is obviously very important for your success in a game like this, are smooth, easy to read. It does still have that problem where when you get close to a big enemy, it can be difficult to see, those high attacks because they kind of go off the screen. I would love to see an FOV slider, but unfortunately that just seems to be a problem with all of these games. I can't think of a single 3D Souls-like game that does not have that issue. The only game actually I know that's a 3D action game that doesn't have that issue is Monster Hunter. And obviously that's not a Souls-like, but Monster Hunter seems to be the only game that's actually fucking figured this out because the camera will zoom out through the wall and will give you an outline of the monster and yourself in gray. It makes it very easy to see and readable. But it does suffer from that a little bit, but like I said, all games in the genre unfortunately do. I think the voice acting is quite good. The soundtrack, as you're hearing right now, is immaculate. There were several points in the game where you get these records that you can listen to by completing character storylines, and I would just sit for a solid like 4 minutes and bask in, the music of the game and just chill and listen to the record. I mean, the music is really, really good. It is definitely up there with FromSoft music, and I think FromSoft music is some of the best in the entire, video game industry. And I think this game is up there with it. I mean, it is solid bangers through and through. And I can't think of a single song that I actually didn't really enjoy. But let's talk about the most important thing here. The gameplay. It's fucking incredible. Okay? I've talked to some people online that say that this just feels like an average Souls-like. If you think this feels like an average Souls-like, you have not played enough Souls-likes, okay? I've played basically all of them. I've played a ton of the 2D ones, but basically all of the 3D ones. These types of games are my fucking jam. I mean, I've played everything from, Neo 1 and Neo 2, the more mainstream ones, all the way to stuff like Thymesia, which is like very small. Almost nobody knows about it, okay? I've played a ton of them. And to say that this is an average Souls-like is, I don't know what the hell you are smoking. It feels so much better than almost every single one. And I'll say it, it feels better than a lot of the Dark Souls games. I think it feels better than Dark Souls 1, 2, Demon Souls. The Demon Souls remaster, maybe not so much, but I'll say it, I think it even feels better and plays better than Dark Souls 3. I said it. So why is that? Well, I'm a guy that loves mechanics. And, you know, at the core of the Dark Souls series, the mechanics are just not really there for me. That's why I've absolutely loved Sekiro and I've loved Bloodborne, is because they have far more mechanics at play. And this game has mechanics through and through, man. And whenever I hear anybody complaining about stuff in the game, honestly, most of the time, and I'm not somebody that says this often, most of the time I'm not somebody that kind of brushes off people's feedback, because I think all feedback is important, and getting a lens from various skill groups is important to understand a game. But a lot of the feedback I've heard from this game is just skill issue. For example, there is no poise in this game, and I see a lot of people complain about that. For those of you that don't know, poise is a mechanic that's essentially your resistance to being interrupted while you are doing an attack or an animation. Now, this is something that you often get in a Dark Souls-like game because you have heavy armor, and this allows you to use slow, heavy weapons and kind of brute force your way through people's attacks, right? So if I'm swinging my giant sword and it's coming down and it's coming down, and then an enemy hits me, then I'm going to just keep powering through and I'm going to hit them. In this game, there is no poise. That means if I am using a heavy, slow weapon and I'm coming down and then I get hit with something, it will knock me out of that attack. And I've seen a lot of people complain about that. And me, if you know me at all, you know I'm a big sword enjoyer. I always use great swords in these types of games, at least for my first playthrough, and this game was no exception. I did that. And you're right, there's no poise in the game, and that can feel bad. However, there are many Fable arts in the game, which you can see those blue bars in the top left, and then your commands in the bottom right there. Every weapon, like top, you know, a blade or whatever, and then every weapon handle has a Fable art, which is essentially a special ability that uses that meter in the top left. And there are many of them that will give you poise, that will prepare a parry attack so you can, you know, instantly attack back. There are many that will power through an enemy attack, and if they're in the middle of an attack, it will deal 3-4x damage. So honestly, I think what really is happening here is kind of a skill issue. If you're using a weapon that is slower, then you want to take a handle that will allow you to have a Fable art that is conducive to that slower, more methodical playstyle. And that is one of the things I love about this game, is the weapon assembly system. Like I said, you can choose any handle and pair it with any weapon other than boss weapons, which is a bit unfortunate. This means if you love the look of a giant sword, but you really like the moveset of like a little rapier, you can absolutely do that, because all of the move sets for weapons are tied to the handles, as well as the scaling of the weapon. So you can use something like a greatsword and put it on a rapier handle, and now it's a dexterity scaling really fast greatsword. And it might look a little silly, especially when like you put a giant hammer top on the tip of a spear, so you're just poking with a hammer. It may look a little bit silly, but that type of ingenuity is something that the series, like the Dark Souls series, has never had. And it really takes me back to almost the type of ingenuity with the weapons transforming that Bloodborne had. I mean, I haven't seen anything from FromSoft on this level since that system. And it's absolutely awesome to see. It leads to some really funny stuff, and also just some really good mixing ups. If you are fighting an enemy and you're really struggling with a slow weapon type, you're using a great sword with a great sword handle, right? You can put that great sword tip onto a normal sword and suddenly you're doing much better. Or maybe you just really don't like the moveset. You can mix it up, and that is so fun to see and leads to so much replayability with the game, because you're essentially like multiplying the number of weapons by a ton because of the fact that, you know, it's completely customizable. On top of that, the Fable art system, that is a whole mechanic that, you know, you could say it's sort of akin to like a mana type of system, or, you know, whatever they call it in Dark Souls, where you're, you know, using your Art of Wars and stuff. You could absolutely say it's akin to that. However, I kind of disagree, because this is something more like a fighting game where you're building up as you're fighting and as you're parrying, and you are unleashing these special moves. And then on top of that, there is tons of upgrades that you can get by finding these items called quartz. And these quartz essentially allow you to completely gain new skills on top of new skills. So you will be able to choose, okay, it's a whole skill tree, and you'll be able to choose, okay, I want enemies to be staggered for longer, and I want to take reduced damage while dashing, right? Some passive effects. And then you'll, by unlocking that that skill node, by putting those new skills in, you'll unlock an extra skill, which will maybe give you an extra heal or something like that. And these things are very powerful, and they really do a great job of lending itself to making the player want to do New Game Plus. I've never really been a fan of New Game Plus in these types of games, because, let's be honest, all they do is they crank the HP values up, they crank the damage up, and then they say, okay, just run through the game again, get fucked. This game actually makes you want to replay it, because you want to unlock more of those skills through the quartz, and you want to go ahead and make your character more powerful. And you can really feel the power increase through that, and it's super fun to do. I also think that the parrying system is great. I mean, this game is really an amalgamation of Bloodborne and Sekiro, and in my opinion, those are the two best FromSoft games, like, by far. Not only because they're the most mechanically intensive and have the most interesting things going on, but I also just enjoy the world and the story the most in those two titles. And this game does a great job of having a world akin to Bloodborne, but with combat that does have a little bit of Bloodborne, especially with the way that it encourages aggressiveness, but it also encourages a parry playstyle that's akin to Sekiro. And I really love this. The parry is hard. I'm not going to lie to you guys. It is tough to do the parry. Not only because enemies delay their attacks left and right, and you're practically always fighting fucking Margaret from Elden Ring. Like, every single enemy in this game delays their attacks, which can definitely be frustrating, you know, before you get the hang of it. But also, the amount of frames that you have to parry an attack is significantly less than something that you have in Sekiro. It's essentially like if you're playing Sekiro on hard mode. And in case you don't know, yes, Sekiro has a hard mode. There's a bell that you can ring, and it completely removes the normal parry and makes it so you can only perfect parry. And that's like playing this game and trying to parry. The amount of frames that you have for a parry is akin to doing the perfect parry in Sekiro. It is very tight. So I'm not going to lie to you guys and say that it's easy, but holy hell, I'm doing a parry only run right now where I'm not allowed to dodge or anything, and it is so freaking fun to go through the game and, like, learn all of the movesets and perfect parry all these bosses. And as you perfect parry them, you'll build up their stagger gauge, which will allow you to do, you know, your big fatal attacks or your visceral attacks for those of you that have played the Souls games. And all of these mechanics just intertwine between the Fable arts and customizing your weapon and handle to figuring out when you're fighting a new boss, okay, is this a parry boss or is this a dodge boss? Because while all bosses can most definitely be parried and dodged, there are most certainly some bosses that lend themselves more to the dodge playstyle versus some bosses lend themselves more to the parry playstyle. And a big reason for that is because if you parry an enemy enough, their weapon will break. And this will not only often change their move set, but it will also severe, as you can see right there, right? It broke his weapon by parrying. But it will also severely decrease their, their lethality when they are hitting you and their range. Sorry if you hear a monkey singing. That's Momo playing with his toy. We got him a new toy. But yeah, I think overall the gameplay in this is just, it's honestly like bar none. It is so incredibly good. I thoroughly enjoy it. And when I see anybody talking about it being an average Souls-like, I just have to ask, what the fuck have you played? Like, what are you playing that I'm not that would put this anywhere near the realm of average? This excels in every single regard and compared to other 3D Souls-likes. I think really the only game that even comes close to this level of polish and feeling good in the Souls-like 3D Souls-like genre is Neo. I think Neo is it, and Neo is very good, but I actually prefer the more parry-based system of this. I find that just parrying in general in games is far more enticing. And then on top of all of that, if parrying isn't for you and you're not very good at the dodges, then you can just build a ton of stamina and you can block. And this game has what's called guard regain. And I don't know if you've seen it in the gameplay, but if you end up blocking an attack, it will do temporary damage to you. And then if you attack the enemy back, you will build back up that temporary life and regain all of your life. Now, this is just an awesome sort of take on the Bloodborne system, because in Bloodborne, when you get attacked, it'll do the temporary damage, and then you'll have a little bit of time to go ahead and attack the enemy back and gain that health back. In this, if you get attacked normally, you're just taking that permanent damage, but if you block the attack, it's the same type of, instance where then you want to go on the aggressive and you want to go ahead and attack the enemies back and build up that health back. So there's just, and then on top of all of that, you have your Legion arm, which is like a completely separate type of special move. You can see it in the bottom left. There's, like 7 or 8 of them that all do different things, and those have a completely big impact on the combat as well. Like, there's so much mechanically in this game. And I think that a big reason why people are not going to enjoy it is because it is a lot. It's a lot to take in. It's a lot to understand. There's many mechanics at play, and if you want to be successful in the game, it most definitely encourages you to use all of those mechanics and become proficient with all of those mechanics. And I think that's why you see players like Asmongold, kind of oonga boonga brained individuals that try and just brute force everything. I think you see those people struggling a lot more than somebody like me, right, that really takes the time to understand the mechanics and all of that. By the end of the game, I had 72 deaths, 72 or 73, which is really not a lot compared to what I've seen a lot of people have by the end of the game. And I contribute a lot of that to actually taking my time and learning the mechanics and learning the ins and outs of the game and really just practicing and trying out different weapons and different handles and stuff like that. So I do think the game is very hard. Don't get me wrong, I think the game is very hard, but I think it's not as hard as people are saying. I think the reason it's so hard for a lot of people is because they're trying to play it like a Souls game, and really you have to play it as this weird sort of hodgepodge of Bloodborne and Sekiro together. With that being said, I know that was pretty long, but and it's almost more like a rant for how much I love the game and all the mechanics. But to get into the cons, very, very minor here. Like, probably to the point of nitpicking how minor they are. I think that many of the items in the game are a little bit too heavy. It kind of forces all play styles to increase their carry weight capacity, because a lot of stuff is just very, very heavy in the game, especially if you want to try and put on all the capacitors and all of the converters in order to give yourself essentially more armor and more elemental resist. You're going to be over encumbered. I think that also sometimes I've had issues where my controller doesn't work. As you can see, I actually played my entire first playthrough on mouse and keyboard because I could not get a controller to work. However, I don't know anybody else that has had this issue, so I'm not really going to hold it against the game. And the final negative that I would say that I do not think is a negative, but I think a lot of people will, is that this game is very linear. I know, especially after Elden Ring, a lot of people think that that sort of elevated the Souls-like experience to the point where they really want these large, open, and several pathways to explore, right? This is not like Dark Souls 1, where it's like, oh, you can go this way, or you can go this way, or you can go this way. It is very linear. It is an entirely linear game, just like Bloodborne. But I would say even more than Bloodborne, because it is very much like not even split paths where you explore. It is very linear. For me, I love a linear game that is on the shorter end. That's just what I prefer as a dude that's busy and, enjoys playing these games, but doesn't want it to take over my entire life. I don't want to put 100 fucking hours into it like an Elden Ring. Or get lost or anything. So for me, that's not a negative, but I know for a lot of people, the linearity of the game is going to be negative. And that's all I have for negatives. I think overall, like I said at the beginning, this is not only the best 3D Souls-like, but I personally enjoy it more than Dark Souls 1, 2, 3, and Demon Souls, and I put it up there with Sekiro and Bloodborne. Now, is some of that coping because I've been waiting so many years for Bloodborne 2, and this is the first game that really has an interesting world and vibe that matches Bloodborne? Absolutely. I'm not going to sugarcoat it at all. But is NeoWiz a bunch of geniuses by taking advantage of the, lust for a Bloodborne 2 and centering their game in such a realistic and gritty world that makes people feel as if their Bloodborne 2, urges are finally being quenched? Yes, they're a bunch of geniuses for doing that. So overall, I think that this game gets my very first of the year 10 out of 10. I honestly believe that this game stands out amongst everything else that's came this year, and that's saying a lot because a lot of the stuff this year has been fantastic. But I have felt like this is the best game this year that's not a sequel or a remake or anything. That's just a completely fresh individual IP. I think this is the best one this year. While I still personally may enjoy like a Dead Space remastered a bit more, because obviously I have so much nostalgia for Dead Space and that was such a faithful recreation of the game, I think that this, obviously that's a remake, and I may really, really like Baldur's Gate 3, but obviously that is a sequel, right? This is a completely own, standalone experience, and I'm very excited to play their future stuff because the stuff that they set up in the story of this game just has me very, very excited to see where they go with it. But anyway, this is kind of a long one, and really it's just me gushing about how great this game is. But, what I would recommend for you guys, try it out. It's on Game Pass, man. It's day one Game Pass. And by the way, this is easily the best year Game Pass has ever had. I mean, you have everything from, Atomic Heart to Starfield to Lies of P. I mean, there's all sorts of bangers coming out day one. Well, Starfield might not be a banger, but to a lot of people it is. But yeah, I think it is a fantastic game. If you like the genre, then this is right up your alley. But I will be playing Lords of the Fallen in the next few days here, so I will hopefully have that review out for you guys shortly. I really doubt that it's going to live up to this game's precedent, but I have an open mind, and I am hoping that it's really good. So yeah, thanks for stopping by. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I'll see all of you in the next video. We're Stream Share Maruni. Bye-bye.